stories we have that we tell ourselves, stories that bend with time. His stories change like books on a shelf, pages that need a rewrite. All these words we leave behind. All these thoughts are chased away by bottles of wine and stories.
Welcome to everyone tonight tuned in for another great evening of live broadcast from the showroom, where tonight we have Storytellers. The Cowichan Valley Storytellers are here tonight. And I have my phone in my hand. I want to put it in my pocket right away, but you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the sound. So everyone in the room can do that, because of the broadcast, it's just unnerving. For those people who are here tonight for the very first time, these are our Fred Astaire's. And you can walk on them gingerly. Words, they're such an amazing thing that you can do with it. And Lee Porteous came to us a couple years ago, 3-4 years ago, just before COVID, wasn't it? And then we took a break, and then we came back to it again. But storytelling is something that needs to be happening. That's how, the whole Cowichan tribes, it was all done, the whole idea of totems was all done by oral storytelling, right? This is how messages in history were passed along. And I grew up with Aesop's fables, and they still have an impact on me, because it was a storytelling that had some kind of resolve at the end that made you shut up and listen, and so I had to. So anyway, tonight, Lee Porteous has managed to gather a couple friends from Ottawa that are great storytellers. They're going to be here tonight to give us some excitement. But right now, let's give a round of applause for Lee Porteous and get the show started.
So I'm calling tonight Stories and Storytellers from Near and Far. We acknowledge with respect the Cowichan First Nation, the largest single First Nation in BC, on whose traditional territory this event is taking place, and whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. Now, on the first Thursday of each month, Longevity John gives us this time in his theatre, and Ted Cadillac gives us the tech support to tell our stories here at the showroom. We're very grateful to Longevity John for his unwavering support of storytelling for adults, and to Ted Cadillac for his patience and skill in recording and posting our evenings, and to both for their support of storytelling. We're also grateful to the Cowichan branch of the library, who gives us their room in the back of the library on the first and third Tuesdays at 5:30 to meet for storytelling, listening, and learning. And all of you are welcome anytime to come to that. So tonight, we're going to, as Longevity John mentioned, we have two people here because the National Storytelling Organization is having its annual conference in Victoria, and that has already begun. But two of the tellers were willing to give up what was going on tonight and come here to tell stories for us. So I really appreciate that. That's Gail Anlin and Kathy Compass. And you'll hear, of course, from them here. I'm very happy to hear as well. They're still tantalizing me with which stories they're actually going to tell. But we'll start with now the group that I mentioned. Of course, we have people here who are in the group and people here who are telling with this group. You don't have to come to tell stories. You could come and listen to stories as well, the library. But our first teller then is Bridget Larson, and she came to Canada via Alberta, then to the Okanagan for 18 years, then to the island. But finally in 2016, she moved to Duncan and felt she had come home. Her Danish heritage shows in her love of the stories of Hans Christian Andersen, and she has another one of those for us tonight, How a Feather Becomes 5 Chickens.
When I grew up in Denmark, Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales was almost like potato and gravy or bread and butter. It was fed to us right from we were little. We were read to, or we could borrow books from the library. And as we went to school, his stories were, of course, in our reading books. So we learned so many stories about Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales. And when you look into Hans Christian Andersen's life, he was born in 1805 and he died in 1875. And in those 70 years, he experienced 3 wars. He lived in extreme poverty in Denmark with illiterate parents. And so many of his fairy tales are based on his own experiences, except he made them into children's fairy tale stories, which later have been made into many movies. So imagine a little town in Denmark in the 1800s, a town of 4,000 people, so it was not very much bigger than the city of Duncan. And in those days, there was no phone, there was no TV, there was no noise of any kind except from the animals, the cows, and whatever nature offered. There were little houses with hollyhocks and so on. And this was where his stories began. Because in these little small towns, they were usually surrounded by houses with chicken coops, pens, where the chickens were pecking around, or there could be pigs or pigeons, whatever. There were all these animals. So this is how this story goes. It's absolutely true. It's one of my dad's favorite. He used that term many times. And when you hear the story, you might even have been guilty of one of these people in the story. So imagine this small town. At one end of the town, there's a chicken pen, and it is evening. And one of the chickens says, "This is a dreadful story. I'm scared of going to sleep tonight. I am so glad that we are so many on the roost." And then she began to tell the story. So the feathers rose on all the chickens, and the rooster dropped his comb. And she was telling a story about what happened in the other end of town in a chicken coop. The sun was setting, and the chickens were coming in to roost. And one of them was a little white chicken with short legs, and she laid her regulatory eggs and was in all manners a very respectful chicken. She picked a little feather off of her, like you know how chickens do, and one of them fell to the ground. And she said, maybe the more I pick, the more beautiful I will be. Now, it was said in all fun, because she was a very joyful chicken in the coop. And then she fell asleep. But beside her, the hens sat side by side, and the one right beside her, she wasn't asleep. She heard and she didn't hear, as you're supposed to do in this world if you want peace. But she had to tell her neighbor. So she said to the neighbor, Did you hear what I heard? I'm not mentioning any names, but there's a chicken that is plucking her feathers, thinking that she will be more beautiful. Now, if I was the rooster, I would despise her. But up above, in the trees, the owls had come out. You know, it's nighttime, so the owls, they wake up at night, and their ears were sharp. They heard everything. Don't listen to that, Owl Mother said. But she had to tell her neighbor owl, because her neighbor owl was a very respected owl. So she flew off. And now the two owls say, woohoo, woohoo, did you hear it? Did you hear it? Now there's a chicken that plucked all her feathers, and she let the rooster watch. She can catch a cold, and she will die. And the pigeons were, where? In the neighbor yard, and they flew over, and they were talking about the chickens. But now there were two chickens that had plucked their feathers to see how they could be different than the other chickens, so they could get the attention of the rooster. The story went on, and the pigeon flew, and they was telling about now there was all of a sudden 3 hens that had plucked their feathers off in love for the rooster, and they fell down and died. But when it reached one of the chicken pens, the rooster flew up, and cock-a-doodle-doo, there was a ruckus, and finally the story ended up back in the chicken coop where this white chicken had plucked a feather. Of course, she didn't recognize her own story anymore, but she was most outrageous because now there were 5 chickens that had plucked all their feathers off to impress the rooster, and they packed each other to bleed, and they fell down and died. Now, what a dreadful story, the white chicken said. That there's many of those. That story need to go in the paper, and I will make sure that so everybody in the land gets to know about it, to shame those chickens and the family. So she made sure that that got into the paper, and it went all over the land, and it is absolutely true.
And I'm sure that's what we all came for, the absolute truth. And our next teller is Kate Reynolds. She has a long history with storytelling, especially to children, but now she is telling to us adults more often. She's been with our Duncan group from the first meeting. She has a knowledge and love of folk tales and how to adapt and craft them. And she has one for us tonight called As Dear as Salt.
Good evening. This is an Italian folktale, and it may remind you of another perhaps more famous tale about a father and his children. There was once a king, and this king had 3 daughters. The youngest daughter was called Zaizola, and she was very beautiful. Now the king had 3 thrones. He had a white throne, a red throne, and a black throne. When he was feeling happy, he sat in the white throne. When he was feeling kind of so-so, then he sat in the red throne. And when he was feeling angry, he sat in the black throne. One day, his oldest daughter came in, and there was the king sitting on the black throne. "Oh, father," she said, "are you angry with me?" "Yes, I am very angry," said the king. "I don't think you love me at all." "Oh, yes, I do," she said. "You are very dear to me." "How dear?" said the king. "Well, you are as dear as bread." That is a good answer, said the king. Next came the second daughter, and she too saw her father sitting there on the black throne. Father, Father, are you angry with me? Yes, I am very angry, said the king. I don't think you love me at all. Oh, yes, I do, she said. You are very dear to me. How dear? Said the king. Well, you are as dear as wine. That's a good answer, said the king. Well, then the third daughter, Zizola, she came in, and she saw her father sitting on that black throne. And she knelt in front of her father, and she said, Father, Father, are you angry with me? Yes, I am, said the king, for I don't think you love me one little bit. Oh, yes, I do, she said. I love you very much. You are very dear to me. How dear? Said the king. You are as dear to me as salt. Salt? Roared the king. Salt is worthless. And he turned to the guard behind his throne and he said, Take my daughter out of the forest and kill her. Well, the queen was shocked. She doted on Zizola, and she looked around thinking, How can I save my daughter? And she remembered in the dining hall was a huge silver candlestick. So she got Zizola to hide in the candlestick, and she told a trusted servant to take the candlestick to the marketplace. If somebody poor comes along and wants to buy the candlestick, tell him an exorbitant price so that he won't buy it. But if somebody wealthy comes by, then give them a very low price so they will take it. So the trusted servant took the candlestick down to the marketplace. And sure enough, this was a very beautiful candlestick. And there were all kinds of poor people who wanted this candlestick. But the servant gave them a price that was just ridiculous for them. But then the prince of a neighbouring kingdom came to the marketplace. He was passing by. He saw the candlestick and he really wanted it. And the servant gave him a very low price. So he bought it, and he took it back to the palace where he lived with his mother. And he set it up in the dining hall. Now, like most young men, he liked to go out in the evening. So that evening, he asked his servants to leave food on the table, and then they could go to bed. Well, when all was quiet, Zizola crept out of the candlestick and ate the food, and then she went back into the candlestick. When the prince came back, he looked around. Where was the food? He was really angry, and so, despite the fact it was the middle of the night, he yelled for his servants who came running, but they had no idea where the food was. Oh, he set it out. Maybe the dog ate it, they said. Well, this happened the second night, and then the third night. And after that, the prince thought, I must find out what's going on. So he got his servants to put a tablecloth over the table that reached right down to the floor, and he hid underneath. Then he waited. The servants put the food on the table and they left, and everything was quiet. Zizola came out of the candlestick and started to eat. The prince came out and took her by the arm, and as soon as he saw her face, he fell head over heels in love with her. Zizola was shocked, didn't know what to do. Don't worry, he said, because you and I will be married. But for now, you have to go back in the candlestick. So that's what she did, and the next morning, the prince asked the servants to take the candlestick to his bedchamber, and also that from then on he wanted to have food served to him in his bedchamber and double helpings because he was very hungry. Now, when the servants brought the food, the prince locked the door. He let Zizola out and they sat at the table and they ate the food and they got to know each other. The queen, meanwhile, was wondering why her son didn't want to eat with her anymore. Now, after a little while, the prince went to the queen and he said, "I am to be married." "Really?" said the queen. "And who is it that you are marrying?" "I am going to marry the candlestick," said the prince. "The candlestick," said the queen. "My son is going crazy. Do you know what people will say?" she said. But the prince was not to be dissuaded. So a week later, a carriage took the prince and the candlestick to the church, and the servants carried the candlestick up to the altar. And then, at the appointed time, Zizola stepped out of the candlestick in her beautiful white wedding dress. She had jewels around her neck. She just sparkled. And the wedding happened, and they went back to the palace, and Zizola told the queen what her father had done. Said the queen. "I think I have a way of teaching your father a lesson." So she invited all the kings thereabout to a banquet to celebrate the wedding. And on the day of the banquet, she got the cooks to make special dishes for Zizola's father. They would have no salt. And then, when all the kings were gathered, she told them that, unfortunately, the princess is not feeling too well, so she will come down later. The food was brought in. The first course was the soup. And Zizola's father took a sip. Bah! Tasted terrible. "Oh," he said, "well, I hope the main dish tastes better." Then the main dish came in. It looked really tasty, but he took one bite and he could hardly get it down. "Oh, this is awful," he said. "There's no salt in this food." And then he realized what he had done, and he started to weep. And at that point, Zizola came into the dining hall. And when the king saw her, he couldn't believe it. It was like she had come back from the dead. And he started to weep again, but this time from joy. And Zizola's mother was asked to the palace as well, and they began to feast, and the feast went on for days. And every dish had just the right amount of salt.
And now I'm very pleased to invite one of our visitors from Ontario, from Ottawa, and that's Kathy Compass. Now, Kathy has been out here a few times. Kathy is, I have known of her as being one of the people who helps the beginning tellers and helps train is probably not quite the word, but get them to be able to tell in coherent and entertaining ways. Despite ourselves, we have trouble with that, I'm sure. And so she's been doing this for many years. But she also came out to tell stories first up in Parksville because one of her students, Marva Blackmore, had started a group there. And those of you who've heard Marva know she is a master teller. In fact, she's been recognized as that, one of Kathy's students. And Kathy is, she and Mary Wigan from there gave us stories from It's one of my head here. It was Sherlock Holmes. How can I forget things like that? Sherlock Holmes. And then she came out a second time, and they did Scottish folk tales as well. So she's twice been brought here and paid to come, which I might say is not actually happening today. She's volunteering her time here. And just because what's going on down in Victoria is the annual meeting of the Storytellers of Canada. And as I say, they've given up the events that are going on tonight to come to be here with us. And we were able to have dinner, some of us from our group, with them and ask them questions. And it was a lot of fun and very educational. So already we've got good value for Kathy being here. And now you get to hear a selection of stories she's chosen to put together for us tonight. Come on up, Kathy.
The gift is the listener, the chance to share stories. My first story comes from Vietnam. One spring, the rain did not come. The sun beat down. The wind blew ceaselessly. Trees drooped. Flowers died. The grass was brown and crisp. Rivers and streams ran shallow. And Toad moved to the edge of the pond and made a home for himself in the thick chocolate mud. Toad was comfortable at the moment, but he knew that soon his delicate skin would crack like the mud. Toad wondered why the Emperor of Heaven had not sent rain. Toad thought, and he decided it was because the Emperor did not know that the earth needed rain. Toad thought, why doesn't someone tell the Emperor that we need rain? And then Toad realized that he could be the one to tell the Emperor. He pulled himself out of the mud and moved through a field. He noticed a handful of bees swarming round a dying buttercup. They were looking for just a drop of nectar. "Come with me," Toad said. "We will ask the Emperor to send rain." And the bees followed along. In time, they passed a desolate-looking farm. The crops were dead in the fields, and a sad rooster slumped on a fence post, a tear trickling down his beak. "What is the matter?" asked Toad. The rooster sniffed. "I buried my last chick this morning. There was nothing for him to eat. And tomorrow the farmer will make me into soup." Come with us," buzzed the bees. "Toad will ask the Emperor to send rain." And so Rooster joined the travelers. The group climbed up and up the mountains. And partway to the top, they stopped outside a cave where a dusty-looking tiger was flopped, half in, half out. Tiger's eyes were closed, and a cracked pink tongue lolled out of one side of Tiger's mouth. "What is the matter?" the bees asked. "Oh, I'm thirsty," groaned the tiger. "Well, get up," crowed Rooster. "Come with us. We will ask the Emperor of Heaven for rain." And so the travelers climbed higher. When they reached the top of the mountain, Toad hopped onto Tiger's shoulders. Rooster perched himself on Tiger's hindquarters, and the bees, they clung to the tip of Tiger's tail. And Tiger leapt from the top of the mountain to the bottommost cloud, to the next cloud and the next, and soon they were walking along the cloud highway of heaven. When the group reached the palace, Toad said, "You, my friends, wait here and keep watch. I will ask the Emperor. But if I need your help, I'll call for you." Toad backed up a step and leapt through the window. He was planning to land in front of the Emperor and bow respectfully. But the marble palace floor was slippery, and Toad slipped and skidded. He bumped into the Emperor of Heaven's foot, and the Emperor kicked Toad against a far wall and then shouted, "Guards! Guards! Remove this disrespectful creature!" From the four corners of the room came guards, 2 with spears, 2 with drawn bows and arrows. They circled round Toad. Toad's eyes shifted from side to side, and he managed to whisper, "Bees." In flew the bees, and the bees stung the soldiers on the knees, on the nose, on the ear, on the elbow, on the back, on the belly button. Oh, those guards dropped their weapons and ran back to their 4 corners, quivering. Toad moved forward and tried to speak, but the Emperor stomped his foot. "Thunder God!" And out from behind the curtains slipped Thunder God, an androgynous creature with luminous blue-green skin, golden hooves, shining horns, and silvery white wings. Thunder God held a drum in one arm, a mallet in the other, and he began to pound on the drum. Bum! 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 The sound shook the throne room. Thunder God dropped the drum and the mallet, covered his ears with his wings, and went to hide behind the Emperor's throne. Once more, Toad hopped forward. "Please, Your Majesty," he called. But the Emperor of Heaven was having none of it. He snapped his fingers and shouted, "Hound of Heaven!" In to the throne room stalked a silvery gray wolf dog, the Hound of Heaven. A creature with shining eyes, sharp teeth, and long claws that scoured the marble floor of the palace. The Hound of Heaven stepped closer and closer to Toad. Toad managed to croak, "Tiger!" And Tiger leapt through the window. She walked straight up to the Hound of Heaven, flipped that creature onto its back, and leaned forward, baring her teeth over his throat. And that is when the Emperor of Heaven spoke. "Uncle Toad! Uncle Toad! Please ask your tiger to spare my hound." Toad was surprised. Here was the Emperor of Heaven calling him, a lowly creature, uncle. In Vietnam, Toad knew that uncle is a term of great respect, and to have the Emperor call him uncle was quite an occasion. "I think," Toad whispered to the others, "the Emperor of Heaven will listen to us now." And so Toad began, "Your Majesty, the earth is dry and thirsty." "Yes," buzzed the bees, "there's nothing to drink." "There's nothing to eat," added Rooster. And Tiger added, "The earth will die." "So please," Toad finished, "send rain." The Emperor clapped his hands. "Uncle Toad, the rain is falling on earth." And then the Emperor of Heaven looked around. He noticed the broken furniture, the smashed plates, the ripped curtains. He said, Uncle Toad, next time the earth needs rain, don't trouble yourself with the journey to heaven. Just croak, and I will send rain. And so, my friends, if you are traveling to Vietnam, or even if you're walking through the woods on this lovely island and you hear a toad croak, look for your umbrella, because you know the rain is coming. My daughter-in-law had to go on an upgrading course this past spring in Victoria, British Columbia, of all places. My son's work schedule doesn't mesh with the school bus run, so would Grandpa and I please come and oversee bus transportation and maybe start supper? Easy peasy. I've done this before. On the Monday morning, 6:45, I had the backpacks on the kitchen table. Lunches packed with vegetable sticks, sandwiches with the crusts cut off, an apple for the kid who likes apples, a banana for the one that only eats bananas, cookies. It was set. I put the sneakers on top, water bottles down the side, and homework folders on top. Off we went. We were at the park in plenty of time to play on the swings before the school bus got there. I headed back to the house, and about 10:30 I was putting the kettle on for a little morning refreshment. The phone rang, and a little voice whispers, "Grandma, you forgot the show and tell." What do you mean I forgot the show and tell? Nobody told me about show and tell. Well, it's show and tell for both of us. Couldn't you bring us something? Like what? I asked. I'd like my Lego dragon and she wants her hockey stick. All right, I said. Meet Grandpa at the side door. Not a very good beginning to the week. But Tuesday morning, I knew things would be better. I didn't have to send sneakers. They stayed there all week, or maybe the rest of the year. I put an extra cookie in the lunches because, after all, I'm Grandma. Water bottles, homework flyers. We're off to the park in time to play. And so I was surprised when the phone rang mid-morning and my other dear little voice said, "Oh, Grandma, I forgot my library book, and I'm reading the Pony Club series, and the next book's on the shelf, but I can't have it unless you bring my book back." "Okay," I said. "Where is it?" "I don't know." "We'll look for it. You watch for Grandpa." 2 days in and 2 strikes out. This was not going well. So Wednesday morning, I stood in front of the 2 little sweethearts and said, "Is there anything you haven't told me? Is there anything I should know?" "No," they said. "It's Fancy Hat Day. We've got 'em." And off we went to the park. And the bus. No problems, no phone call all morning. But in the middle of lunch, the phone rang. I had a peanut butter sandwich between my teeth. I pointed for Grandpa to get the phone. He lifts the receiver, and an automated voice says, "This is a message from the parent council of your local school. We wish to inform you that Friday is hot lunch day. This nutritious lunch is served to all the children in the school, providing they return a signed permission form and sufficient funds. Please see that money for your children, and the form reach the school by 3:10. This is a recording. Well, we found the permission form magneted to the fridge. We scoured our wallets for the correct change, and Grandpa did the usual. Thursday. Thursday was going just fine. We even had pancakes for breakfast. I put the lunches in the school bags and off we went, got to the bus stop in the nick of time. But the phone rang. A little voice said, "Grandma, are you mad at us?" "No, sweetie. Why would you think I'm mad at you?" "'Cause you didn't pack any sandwiches." "Of course I did. I put your lunches in your bag. There's egg salad sandwiches and carrot sticks and cookies and..." "Grandma, there's no sandwiches." I opened the fridge, as I said, "Of course there is," and saw 2 reusable sandwich boxes full of egg salad. Meet Grandpa at the usual place. Friday, no lunches. It's got to be perfect. But as we're about to go out the door, my grandchildren smile at me, and I say, "Did you brush your teeth this morning?" 2 little heads shake no. "Did you brush your teeth last night?" 2 little heads shake no. "Did you brush your teeth at all this week?" 4 little eyes look at the floor. "Get in that bathroom and brush those teeth right now." We missed the bus. I turned down the children's generous offer to stay home and keep me company. I said, "If we scoot, we can beat the school bus to the school 'cause we don't have to stop." Well, turn right, turn left, along the gravel road, and then one of them shouts, "Grandma, look out for the bunny!" I slam on the brakes. The other one says, Where's the bunny? Is the bunny okay?" They undo their seatbelts, jump out of the car, so I have to follow. And there, beside the right-hand driver's tire, is the still body of a little gray-brown rabbit. Well, the smaller one, it starts that hiccupy sound that comes before a deluge. The older one says, "Don't worry, kiddo. We can have a funeral and bury it with your goldfish." Oh, the tears start. And that's when a half-ton pickup going the other way skids to a stop. "Hey, lady, is everything okay? I can change your tire if you've got a flat." "Nah," says the older one. "Grandma just killed the Easter bunny." Well, the high schooler comes over, bends down, puts 2 fingers on the bunny's chest, and smiles. "It's okay, kids," they say. "Your rabbit's just having a little nap. I can feel the heart. And I've got something in the truck that'll probably help." The high schooler reaches through the passenger window, pulls out a green and blue aerosol can, gives it a shake, psh, 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 squirts the rabbit. Well, a shiver goes through the rabbit. It sits up, it raises one paw, and hops towards the side of the road. Well, my 2 high-five that high schooler. They're all smiles. We look at the side of the road. The rabbit's going down the ditch, up the other side, and raising its paw. "Come on, kids," I said. "We got to beat that school bus." I buckle them into their car seats. They look up and watch the rabbit slip under the frost wire fence, turn, raise its paw. I go over, thank the high schooler. I said, "You saved my bacon. I didn't want to go through life being known as Grandma, the rabbit murderer. But tell me, what's in that can, 'cause I gotta get some." "Don't know," the student says. They hand me the can. I adjust my bifocals, look at the can and see that it says, "Hairspray may cause permanent wave." It's a story I enjoy. It's truth and fantasy cross paths there. The door of the hall closet opened, and in slipped a corn broom. She turned nervously side to side and smiled politely at the self-satisfied jug of Javex. She offered to shake hands with the bottle of all-purpose cleaner, waggled fingertips at a giggling gaggle of dust claws, and carefully stepped around the stepladder. She raised her eyes and noticed at the far end of the closet a push broom was hanging on the wall. The push broom smiled, and so the corn broom, with a come-hither look, sashayed the length of the closet. Those two hung side by side, and soon were getting better acquainted. Much better acquainted, so that it was no surprise that 2 weeks later a wedding was announced. One would be the bride broom, the other the groom broom. For the wedding, the bride had a corn gold updo and a long, slinky white dress. The groom looked debonair with a fresh flat top cut and a rented tux. A brief but meaningful ceremony was conducted by the vacuum. And afterwards, while the guests nibbled canapes from the closet freezer and bubbling water that was stored on a high shelf, the bride and groom brooms circled on the tiny dance floor. The bride broom, she laid her head on the groom broom's shoulder and whispered, "Honey, honey, I think I'm going to have a little whisk broom." The groom broom jumped. Why, that's impossible. It can't be happening. We've never even swept together." "I knew it," shouted the window cleaner. "She's been sweeping around." That was an internet joke that I massaged a little bit. But when I look into my hall closet, I can just see it all happening. And I want to finish off my set back with a folk tale. It happened in Helm, that little town in the middle of nowhere. It was winter. Reuben and Avram, they sat in the kitchen, enjoying the warmth of the stove while they watched the thick, white, feathery snowflakes fall to the ground. They didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. They were both lost in their thoughts, remembering what had been and wishing for what might be. You see, back earlier in the year, at the time of Passover, Reuben's wife, she gave him a handful of coins. Now, these coins may not seem like much to well-to-do people like yourselves, but it was 2 years' worth of egg money. She gave him the coins, and she said, "Reuben, I want new pots. You go to the town, to the market, and you get me pots, good pots, with tightly fitting lids, strong handles, and copper bottoms. I'd go myself, but there are children to watch, a cow to milk, and eggs that will not gather themselves." Reuben was delighted to go to the town, and of course he asked his brother Avram. After all, good talk shortens the road. All storytellers know that. The men walked along. They talked of this and that, and then Avram said, "Why does your wife need new pots? Already she's the best cook in Chelm." "Pots won't make any difference." "She wants pots, she wants pots. I don't know." "Still," Avram said, "it's not like she can't cook. She's got old pots, so she doesn't need new pots today, or tomorrow, or even next Thursday. What we could do is borrow the pot money and make an investment. We could grow a small fortune. Then we'd buy her new pots, and we would have money to start a business." The brothers liked the idea of being businessmen. They talked about opening a bakery or maybe a barber shop. They discussed a cafe with Rivka doing the cooking, but thought they'd better not ask her. On they walked, and when they got to the town, they looked about. What should they buy? Something that people needed. What do people need? Stoves. People always need stoves. Winters are cold in Chelm. People want to keep the house warm and cook their food. But the brothers wisely looked at the stoves and decided they were too big and too heavy to get all the way back to Chelm. They'd need something smaller. Anvils? There were plenty of anvils. No, they were heavy, and the only person in Chelm who needed an anvil was the blacksmith, and he had 2 already. The brothers walked up and down through the market, looking at gloves, at hats, at shoes, sniffing perfume. Nothing seemed right. What could they buy? Avram had an idea. Pillows! Pillows! They're light, they're easy to carry, and everyone needs a pillow so that they have a good night's sleep. Because with a good night's sleep, you wake up with energy and ambition to do a hard day's work. The brothers spent every last zloty on pillows. And then they realized that while a man could carry 5 or 6 pillows, pillows were very bulky. They might strap 10 or 12 to their back, but that still left them with a pile of pillows to get home. What could they do? The sun was setting. As the sky turned from blue to strawberry pink to dusty mauve, they tugged at their whiskers and wondered. As the sun sunk lower in the sky, the evening breeze began to blow. It blew in the direction of home. And that's when Avram had another idea. We don't need to carry the pillows to Helm. We can rip them open and let that wind carry the feathers. The feathers can fly home. We'll just put them back in the pillowcases. It was a wonderful idea. It only took minutes to rip the pillows open and wish a good journey to the feathers. It was late the next day when the brothers got back to Helm, and they were surprised that they didn't see the odd feather at the turnoff. They were puzzled when there weren't any feathers on the top of the shed roof or piled on the windowsill. Reuben, he said to his wife, "Where did you put all the feathers?" "Feathers? What feathers?" So he told her about the investment of the pot money, and the good woman rolled her eyes. She knew where the feathers were. They were on the steeps of Russia, or halfway across the ocean to the New World. But Avram and Reuben, they weren't worried. they explained to her that they, two strong, healthy men, it took them more than a day to walk home from the market. Those little tiny feathers that had never made the journey before. Oh, it would take them longer. They might have to stop and have a rest. They could have made a wrong turn and got lost. Every day, the brothers walked out to the signpost and looked for the feathers. They put up posters that said, "Feathers come home! Feathers welcome!" No feathers. And the days and weeks passed. The wheat ripened in the field and it was harvested. Pears and apples were picked and packed into straw-filled barrels for the winter. Root vegetables were stored, and still no feathers. But the brothers did not give up hope. The harvest festival came. It was Sukkoth. Still no feathers. But the brothers, every night, they sat and waited. And in November and December, when the snow started to fall, the brothers felt more confident. They were sure that their feathers were like groundhogs or bears hibernating for the winter. When spring came and the snow melted, the feathers would re-emerge. And you know, perhaps they might, because in Helm, anything is possible.
Well, that's a hard act to follow, but I'm going to try and do that. And this piece is about mosquitoes. I'm hoping to start with a poem, and we'll see how far we get, by Myra Stillborn, a Canadian poet. It's called "A Mosquito in the Cabin." Although you bash her, swat her, smash her, and go to bed victorious, happy and glorious, she will come winging, zooming and zinging, wickedly singing over your bed. You slap the air, but she's in your hair, cackling with laughter. You smack your head, but she isn't dead. She's on the rafter. She's out for blood, yours, my friend, and she will get it in the end. She brings it first to boiling point, then lets it steam, and with a fee, fi, fo, and contented fum, she sips it while you dream. And we've all been in that cabin, haven't we? A time or another. So how is it, though, that it's the female mosquitoes that go after our blood? For that answer, we can go to Vietnam a long, long time ago. Tam and Dieppe had a farm. He would work on the rice fields outside. She would do the work inside the house, and she had a silkworm farm. But all the time that she's doing what she needs to do, she's resenting it. She's lazy. She doesn't want to do this. She is daydreaming about ordering servants about. However, one day a terrible thing happens. When Tam comes home, he finds Dieppe lying on the floor, dead. Well, he kneels beside her and he's saying the requisite prayers and he's weeping, and a vision comes to him. This vision is so clear, and what it tells him to do is to take Dieppe in a boat and go out in the ocean to find the sacred mountain in the sea. So he does that. Now, nobody knows where that mountain is, least of all Tam, but he has faith in this vision. And so he rows and he rows. He can't see anything. In the daytime, it's like a misty fog in the sun. But he's so sure about this vision he had. He keeps rowing and he rows at night, and it takes 3 days. But he does find that sacred island in the sea. And he carries her body up a narrow, steep path to a meadow that's full of flowers and butterflies, and lays her down in the shade of a tree. And almost instantly, an old man with sparkling eyes, wearing a monk's habit, appears and offers him that he could become forgotten the name, to study to be a monk himself. But Tam says no. He loves Dieppe and he wants her back. Well then, says the monk, make a small cut near your wrist and drop 3 drops of blood on her arm. So Tam does that. 1, 2, 3. And each one is absorbed into her skin. And she starts to cough and she wakes up. She's alive again. He is so happy. But the monk lectures her and says, now, you have been brought back to life, and there are some conditions. You must be honest and hard-working. Otherwise, there will be a penalty to pay. And so the two go down the path and into the boat, and Tam starts rowing again and rowing. It doesn't take very long this time, but the docks emerge out of the mist. And so they decide to stop and pick up some provisions on their way home. And so Tam ties up the boat, and Dieppe waits there, and he goes off to buy the supplies. Well, as she's waiting there on the dock, this wealthy merchant in his beautiful boat comes up to the dock, and there's some repairs needed in the sails. And so the wealthy merchant notices this beautiful woman standing by herself on the dock and invites her up for tea. Well, they sit there having tea, and this is Dieppe's dream. Here she is with this wealthy man on this beautiful ship drinking tea, and he falls in love with her and asks her to marry him. She doesn't mention Tam, and she agrees, and so off they go. By the time Tam gets back, there's nothing there. There's just his little boat and no wife. But an old sailor, there are all these old sailors around the docks who see everything, and he told Tam what had happened and where that merchant lived. And so Tam set out. It took him 3 days to find his way to that merchant's place, but find it he did. And he knocked on the door, and he told the servant that he wanted to see his master, and he would wait in the garden for him. He went into the garden, and who is there but Dieppe? And she's cutting flowers. She's pretty shocked to see him, but she says right away, I don't want to come back. This is where I want to be. Well, Tam is furious, and he says, I don't want you back. All I want back is my 3 drops of blood. Whew, she's pretty relieved about that. That's a pretty easy way out. So she takes the knife that she was using to cut the flowers, and she makes a cut on her hand, and she drops those 3 drops. 1, 2, 3. And as the last one hits, she begins to change. She shrinks. Her face becomes horrible and ugly, gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and she starts to cry out, I want them back. I want my blood back. I want my blood back. Give me my blood back. Blah, 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 blah. Well, she turned into a mosquito. Tam ran as fast as he could. He hopped in that boat and he rowed as hard as he could and got to the sacred island. And then he became a devotee, and he asked the monk, what happened? What happened? And the monk said, well, she was being punished. She got that second chance of life, but she threw it away. And now she, Dieppe, and all of her female descendants are going to be looking to get back those 3 drops of blood. There is a reason, and we can find it in the folk tales. So the next person who's coming up is our second recruit from back east, and that's Gail Anglin. And Gail is the present co-president of the Ottawa Storytellers, and she was one of the people who helped develop the group as it is now. She's been doing this for quite a long time. She told me that she actually thought she might end up being a teacher, and she tried that in several different ways, but the powers that be always found a way to make that not happen. So she's she's a librarian, but she has been telling stories for a very long time, all kinds of stories. And I actually, this is the first time I've met her in person, but I've always felt like I knew her because during the pandemic, there were so many Zoom calls, and I got to see her do many different things. Some were more like plays, and some were regular stories. And I was told that she's particularly known for her comedic touch. But what surprised me the most when I saw her, if you got the email that I sent out, you would have seen the picture with her yellow or blonde hair. She's apparently dyed it. It's now gray. So I didn't quite recognize her when she got off the plane. We looked at each other like, you? But it turns out to be that wonderful storyteller that I had heard online, and she's just as good in person.
Thank you, Lee. And it's such a pleasure to be here with you in your beautiful city of Duncan. I've met several people here who say that they had lived in Ottawa at some time or another, and I can see why you moved here. I have two stories for you tonight. The first is called The Desperate Refugee. Alicia. That's who this story is about. Think big, pink, long, skinny legs, bird. If you're thinking a flamingo, you probably wouldn't be thinking of that in the Ottawa River back in 1997, for the only time ever that a flamingo was there, before or since. But Alicia had escaped from her bird refuge in Litchfield, Connecticut. The workers were coming to trim her wings, and she just took off. And she was from Chile originally, and so she was programmed. Her internal navigation was set so that she should go, when things began to get cold, she should fly northwest. But from Connecticut, that was flying direct to cold death. So she appeared on the Ottawa River, and Kathy Knee-High, who founded the Ottawa Wild Bird Care Center, got a call saying, "Kathy, there seems to be a flamingo out at Shirley's Bay." Yeah, oh, I see. She talked to one of the other employees, Steve Hamlin. She said, "Listen, Steve, somebody says there's a flamingo out at Shirley's Bay. I think it's probably a heron, but I'd like you to go out and have a look." And so he went out, and Kathy got a call. He said, "Kathy, it's big, it's pink, it's a freaking flamingo." Well, now they had to catch it. But she didn't know anything about flamingos because they are not native to Ottawa. So she began calling different places and learning about what flamingos like to eat and how you might possibly catch one. She collected a bunch of pink plastic flamingos. She got some food that was going to be attractive and went off to Shirley's Bay and set some things out and sat in a blind and waited and waited. No luck. No. The flamingo didn't pay any attention at all to it. So another kind of plan was going to have to be devised, and a volunteer, Alan Walsh, 2 days later had built a trap. It was 5 meters across, and it was taken out to Shirley's Bay and put with those pink flamingos around it and the bait inside. And a couple of blinds were built, And so Nehi and Walsh and the other Hamlin were down, hidden, passing around a thermos of coffee and watching the flamingo. There was the trap, there was the flamingo, and they waited. And they waited. And they waited, and Nehi said, "That is one smart flamingo." It took off, and 2 days later, it was spotted by a bird watcher at the Andrew Hayden Park. And so the trap was quickly moved down along the river. This time, a mirror was set up on the bank so that the bird could see herself and think there was another flamingo. They had even gotten a tape of flamingo sounds, and they had a remote-controlled plastic Canada goose. Surely, this time, they had her. And they waited. And they waited. And she just didn't go inside that trap. Instead, she took off and she went, 10 kilometers up the river. There was a stream, and she took to feeding up there. But it was getting colder, getting a whole lot colder. And they were going to have to do something quickly if they were going to save this bird. There was a volunteer. His name was Saeed Sheikh, and he was from Kenya. And he had actually rescued a flamingo in the Indian Ocean. So he pulled on some hip waders, and he had a butterfly net stuck down the back. He got on his knees, and he began moving on his knees down toward the bird who was there. And the bird saw him. He was rubbing his fingers together under the water in a way that replicated the sound that flamingos make when they're eating. And she started toward him. "She's going to walk right into his open arms," said Nehi. And he was just about to reach out and catch her when his knees went in a hole in the river and he splashed and she flew off. Well, now it was getting seriously cold, and they were going to have to do something to catch this bird. The Shirley's Bay had actually frozen right solid, so she couldn't go there anymore. She was spending all her time up at that stream, and there was a part, it kind of narrowed down to sort of 7 meters across. And Nehi thought that a different kind of trap could be made that could go there, but that trap was going to need 7 big nets, almost invisible and extremely expensive, unfortunately, much beyond the budget of the Wild Bird Center. But by this time, the plight of that bird had been in the newspapers, had been on the television, and many, many hearts in Ottawa were touched by the plight of this awful situation, this death-defying moment for this bird. So 3 people donated nets. But that left 4 still to go. And then the Ottawa Citizen came to the rescue and donated the other 4 nets. And on December 5th, the nets arrived. And Nehi and Hamlin and 10 volunteers went and they pounded stakes into both sides along the creek there. And they took 3 of the nets and they put them around. They took some more and they put them across the top, and they left enough to hang over and make a door. And then they waited. They set up rosters with 2 volunteers each to have a 24-hour watch on that net. They were going to get that bird. But the bird was there. But she just wasn't going in that net. And then she disappeared. And they didn't see her for days. It was very cold. The stream froze over. And finally they thought, well, she's most probably dead. And they decided they just had to admit failure. So they were out there at the stream. Nehi put on her own hip waders. She was heading out to start dismantling that net. when all of a sudden somebody called, "There she is!" And there she was. Mihai was so excited, she went right inside the cage and she started breaking the ice with her bare hands. Hamlin came in and helped drag the ice out. And then they went into the blind and they waited. She was pecking at the ice. She was so hungry at this point, and she could see the food down below, but she couldn't get at it. Oh, let her stomach get the better of her, Hamlin was thinking. And then she seemed to hear the running water inside the cage where it was broken, and she made her way into that trap. Hamlin was ready. He had his hand raised. She put her head down in the water to feed. And then when she came up and turned toward the back of the trap, he dropped his hand down. "Now," he said. And they put the door down, and she was inside the trap. And then he went inside, and he enveloped her in a big, tight hug, held her close. She didn't even struggle. He had a huge grin on his face as he kissed the top of her feathery head. After just a week at the Wild Birds Center, she had regained her full weight. And so she was able to fly back to Connecticut, this time courtesy of Air Canada, to rejoin her flock and her mate. Now, this next story, actually, I need your help with. In it, I want you to play the part of the band of robbers, if you don't mind. And when they are asked if they have had the measles, one after another, they say, "Oh, no, I haven't, not me, no, I don't know." You just have to say something indicating that you have not had the measles. And there will be other points along the way where I think you may feel called upon to respond as the band of robbers. And please do feel free to do that. Serena Laburnum, the luscious librarian, was making her way home along the edge of the woods when all of a sudden she was accosted by a band of robbers. And the chief of the robbers said, "We are kidnapping you." "Well, I don't know why," said Miss Laburnum. "I am not wealthy, and I have no wealthy friends or relations. All I have is that I run the library." "Exactly," said the robber, whose blue eyes were sparkling over his mask and his black beard curling below. "Exactly. The library does not run without you. The city council will have to pay handsomely to get you back." "Well," said Miss Laburnum, "I think I should tell you that I have been with my friend for the weekend, and her boys have come down with the raging measles." "Ha!" laughed the robber chief. "I've had 'em. Well, none of the other robbers, as it turned out, had ever had the measles. Well, it was just a couple of days later that the robbers began to have runny noses and become irritable. "If I could return to the library," said Miss Laburnum, "I could look at the reference volume for effective and efficient home nursing. And because I believe that a hot bath brings out the spots." "The spots," said the robber chief. "Oh, my goodness, who will take robbers with spots seriously?" "I don't know," said Miss Laburnum, "but it's not my responsibility or the responsibility of any librarian to take robbers seriously. I'm just saying I should go and get that book." Well, he was reluctant, but his fellows were more and more miserable, and finally he gave in because the suffering of the infectious villains was just touching his heart. You're good. Well, she went and she got the book and she brought it back. Yes, she said, just as I thought. It says that you all have to have a warm bath. They didn't like that idea. But after the bath, they all had to go into the cave, and it had to be darkened because, as she read in the book, light and such can upset the eyes, damage the eyes when you have the measles. Well, there they were. She had tucked the covers under their curly black beards, and they were lying in their beds. And she said, while I was at the library, I not only picked up the Guide to Efficient and Efficacious Home Nursing, but I picked up a few other things because I knew you were going to be in here and you were going to need some entertainment. And so I've brought you some stories. Now, tell me, what have you read? It turned out those robbers were practically illiterate. And so she began with Peter Rabbit. And she started working her way up. They loved Treasure Island. They had a lot of difficulty with Robin Hood. Because the part where Robin Hood was taking the money, they liked that. But giving it away? No, 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 no. The robber chief was sent to make soup that she had found a recipe for in the book. And, well, after a time, the measles passed, and the town council had delayed doing anything about the ransom note because at the meeting when they had received the note, it was said, where does this come from? Is this out of the budget? Is this under employee expenses? Or is this the cultural committee? And well, the cultural committee didn't meet for 2 weeks, and so that was why there was such a long delay about the whole thing. And by the time the measles were over, before the 2 weeks anyway, it was a bust, and the robber chief had to admit it. And so Miss Laburnum and the reference book, which was really only allowed to be out for 1 week in any event, had to return to the library. And when she got back to the library, well, there was a lineup of desperate clients waiting because she had the only key. And it seemed that things were going along very nicely. Once again, Miss Laburnum was doing her work in the library when all of a sudden, one day, the library door slammed open and in rushed the robber chief. Miss Laburnum, he said, you've got to help me. Please, the policeman is after me. If you don't help me, I'm going to be arrested. Well, she said, perhaps I can help you, but you have to tell me your full name. No, he said, I can't do that. You must, she said, or I cannot help you. All right, he said, leaning over the desk, my name is Salvation Loveday. She hid a little smile. It was that name. They bullied me mercilessly all through my childhood, and it was that turned me to my life of crime. She was busy typing, and she put a little sticker on his spine, and she took him over to the nonfiction section, and she set him in amongst the L's. Just had she gotten him up there in place when, boom, the library door opened again, and the marble floor rang with the footsteps of the town policeman. Miss Laburnum, says the policeman, I have come to take that robber chief that you have over there in the L section. Oh, yes, of course, said Miss Laburnum. Very good, officer. Could I have your card, please? I beg your pardon? I need your card because, as you know, the rules of the library are that nothing can be removed from the library without properly signing it out, so I need your card. Oh, he said. Oh, it's at home, marking the place in a book I'm reading. Oh, I'm sorry, she said. But I can go home and get it. Yes, she said. Why don't you do that? And so he went back. Once again, you could hear the footsteps ringing across the marble floor. Then she went over and she took the robber chief down off the shelf. Now, she said, tell me what you're doing here. Well, he said, you know, before you came out there into the woods with us, we used to have a good time. We'd sing a few rumbustical songs. We'd tell a few off-colored jokes. We'd have fun in the evening around the fire. But now that they've heard all these stories, they want more of them. And so I've come into town to get some books for them. Oh, I see, she said. Well, all right, you'll need a card for that. And she made a card up for him. Well, but what about me, he said. What if that policeman comes back? Won't he take me? No, she said. I've already checked you out to me. Oh, says the robber chief. Wonder if I could check you out sometime. She didn't answer that. She just went and helped him collect a bunch of books, and he went running out the door just in time because the policeman was coming in. He was a little slower. He was normally really quite quick, but he tripped over a little boy on a tricycle, and so he was slowed down by that. And when he came in, he looked over to the L section and he said, what's happened to the robber chief over there in the L section? Oh, she said, oh, seems someone's checked him out. Oh, I'm sorry. You should have put him on reserve. Oh, said the policeman, I see. Well, when can I get him? I don't know, she said. There could be quite a long list, but I can put your name down, and as soon as it's available, you can have him. Well, after that, the robber chief came quite regularly. It was quite dangerous for him, but he came regularly in to get books. And those robbers became more and more educated and intelligent and erudite. And one day there was an earthquake. Terrible earthquake. The robbers were out in the forest, and the earth was shaking, and the trees were wobbling, and pine cones were pelting down. And then, when it stopped, one of them shouted, oh, Miss Laburnum, the library. Yes, they said, we must see what's happened to her. And they began running down the road, shouting, save Miss Laburnum, save the library. A little slow, but once you got there, I thought it was excellent. So they were running down the road shouting that, and the policeman saw them go by, and he thought, this is my chance. And then he heard what they were shouting, and he thought, oh, that's right, Miss Laburnum in the library. So he also started running down the road. He thought, I can catch them after. But right now, it's time to go see about what's happened in the library. Well, what happened in the library was that Miss Laburnum had been in the back room where all the old volumes were put, the old sets of encyclopedias and things, and she was just putting one of the big volumes of an encyclopedia up on a shelf when the earthquake came, and the whole thing tumbled over on her, and she was completely buried in books, entombed in tomes, she thought, is such an appropriate way for a librarian to die. Well, the robbers came in, and they could see what a mess it was, and they began doing what they could to clean up. I mean, the card catalog, this was an old story, the card catalog had come out, and the cards were all over the floor, and the geranium pots had fallen off, and just everything was a mess. But Salvation Loveday, the robber chief, was looking for Miss Laburnum, and he made his way into that back room, and he saw the pile of books, and he knew what had happened, and he began pulling those books off. Serena Laburnum, Salvation, is it you? "Oh, what a good name for you. It's a perfect name." And he got the books off her, took her hands, lifted her up, dusted her off a bit. "Miss Laburnum," he said, "I don't know if this is the right time. I don't know if there's ever a right time, but since I've met you, I want to give up my life of crime, and I want to know, will you be my wife?" "Yes," she said. "Ever since I checked you out that time, I've had a special feeling for you." So they went into the library, and there were the policemen and the robbers working side by side, alphabetically arranging things. And Salvation Loveday said, "Could I have your attention, please? Miss Laburnum has just agreed to be my wife." Oh, a huge cheer went up. Yay! Thank you. But Miss Laburnum said, "Under one condition, and that condition is that all of you robbers must give up your life of crime, and you must become librarians." You were, I'm afraid to say, not really very good robbers, but I think you will be excellent librarians. Well, those robbers, they blushed bright red under their curling black beards. They had never dreamed of such praise back when they were just robbing out in the woods. And after that time, well, the wedding took place, and that library was by far the liveliest place because there were a lot of librarians, and they were very good at games. And okay, they didn't pay much attention to the signs that said "quiet, please." In fact, they often ripped them down. And Miss Laburnum, Mrs. Loveday that now was, she kind of ignored that. I think those robbers probably were more librarians all the time than anybody would have ever guessed. And perhaps Miss Laburnum, that is now Mrs. Loveday, was more of a robber at heart than anyone would have guessed. But we'll never know that for sure. The only one that knows is her husband, and he'll never tell us.
Well, I wonder if our guest tellers could just come up for a minute. This is just a small gift, just for you to remember us by. Anyway, thank you so much for coming and giving up the time there. And we had a great time.
They have a real future as either robbers or librarians.
Did you hear that? You have a great future, either as librarians or robbers. So it falls to me. I want to thank you all for coming. It was great to have you here, and thank our guests and our regular tellers as well, and also Longevity John and Ted Cadillac. And I just wanted to tell you that if you want to join us at the library for around the tables telling stories and various things like that, our next one there is the 7th of July at 5:10 to 7 p.m. But if you want to come here on July 2nd at 6 to 7 as part of the 39 days of July, we are going to be here for that time. And you'd be most welcome to come back. And I'm very happy that you came tonight. You helped make it a great, fun show. Thank you.
Oh and stories.